Witajcie w rozmowach logistyków. Nazywam się Adam Sobolewski. Poprzez ten podcast chcę Wam pomóc szybciej i efektywniej budować biznes. Podcast nagrywamy dzięki sponsorom. Partnerami dzisiejszego odcinka są Europa Systems, producent i integrator automatyki dla logistyki i produkcji. Ponad 25 lat doświadczenia zdobytego w setkach projektów w 35 krajach. Magna Valor, firma doradcza oferująca usługi optymalizacji łańcucha dostaw i logistyki. Tworzymy rozwiązania redukujące koszty i efektywnie skalujące operacje. Budujemy wartość Waszego biznesu. Czy jesteście gotowi na dawkę praktycznej wiedzy? Mam nadzieję, że tak, bo zaczynamy nowy odcinek. And today in Logistics Conversations, we will have a very special guest, Andreas Dannenberg. Hello, Andreas.
Hello, Adam. Nice to be here.
Thank you for coming to talk with us. I'm really interested in learning your views on the global S&OP implementation, because you bring a really extensive experience in supply chain management across diverse industries and geographies. When I was looking through your LinkedIn profile, I noted such strategic roles at companies like Logitech and Chiquita, where you led regional and global teams to optimize operations and create customer-centric solutions. Recently, I have seen that you have also expanded your expertise through the COO program at INSEAD, and you engage with a lot of startups developing their operational and supply chain capabilities, addressing some challenges in planning, logistics, and manufacturing. That pretty big scope of history in the supply chain. I don't know. I should add something else to what you have been doing recently.
Thank you, Adam. I think you were very kind and nice to me. So I think you said it very well. The only thing I may want to add there, I recently also started at Kinetic Consulting. So we are somewhat colleagues now, focusing in their finance, operations, procurement, and supply chain practice, helping to bring, to develop value for businesses and help to optimize the value chain for clients.
Yeah, so you do something similar to what we are doing with Magna Valor. This is a side story for today. The main story is actually how you help Logitech to build the global sales and operations planning process. But maybe before we jump into that, let me ask you, what do you understand by the S&OP? Because my personal view is that this is very misunderstood process in the supply chain.
It's a very, very interesting question. And I'm sure if you ask different people, you will get very, very different answers. Some talk about S&OP, some talk about IBP and other acronyms. For me, if I go to the essence of S&OP, sales and operations planning, in my definition, in my view, it is an opportunity for any organization to get all stakeholders together, which are involved in sales, operations, and planning, and to have some type of synchronization discussion and talk about business opportunities.
It's a very short and very to the point description. I like to say that S&OP, in short, is just bringing every week or every month everybody in the company to the same table. Yeah, and sometimes this is a process that becomes inflated. It becomes overcomplicated, and people are missing what you just told. That this is about synchronization. This is not about having a perfect number, because nobody has a perfect number. This is about setting the goals together and actually knowing what we will do. Each other in supply chain, in sales, or in marketing. So this is so simple and so hard at the same time, yeah. Especially in companies that have scale, in companies that do not have a single location but are working globally or at least regionally in Europe, and they have several warehouses, they have several plants where they are sourcing the goods. the things that fit perfectly what you were doing at Logitech. Yeah. So maybe you can tell us exactly from this global company perspective how this S&OP process looked like.
Yeah. So and maybe let me start with explaining a bit when I joined Logitech, what was the status at that point, and how we moved through the journey. So when I started at Logitech, which is, if I think back, it's 12 years ago, I started as head of S&OP EMEA. And the goal I had in this role was to roll out a global S&OP design to Europe or to the EMEA region and share the regional S&OP meeting. And later on in my different roles at Logitech, in regional or global supply chain roles, I always felt like S&OP is a cornerstone of my role, and it's very critical, as I mentioned before, to get all business stakeholders together and have, on a continuous and ongoing basis, have critical business discussions, talking about opportunities, about risks, and really have a demand-supply synchronization conversation. And also how this aligns and feeds into the executive S&OP, because sometimes you do have different conversations on a regional level. So when you speak with your regional stakeholders, with your regional sales head and regional operations, the discussions are different than when you speak about an executive S&OP. It's different investment conversations, it's different risk conversations, but these all need to feed into each other, and they all need to have a consistency and alignment, so that also what comes back then from the executive level can be executed on a regional level in order to be synchronized as an organization, as a company.
Yeah, so basically you mean you were running a two-level process, one on the executive level and a more detailed one on the regional level. But to let our listeners understand the complexity of the process, you mentioned that at first you were responsible for EMEA. How many, I don't know, product lines, SKUs, locations were at that time under your supervision? Because everybody knows Logitech as a global company, but I think not everybody understands what it really means to be global. Yeah.
So I think Logitech always had the idea that they are a very complex and unique company. The more I have chances to speak to other organizations, I start to realize it is not that complex. But to give you some numbers, overall in Europe, we were running about 4,000 different SKUs. Among more than 200 different product lines. Logitech has one central warehouse for Europe, which is in the Netherlands, and is basically represented by a regional sales and marketing headquarter, which is in Switzerland, but has regional or local sales and distribution offices all across Europe. So from a supply chain perspective, maybe not that complex. From a commercial perspective, I think more complex than many other organizations. So if you want to run an effective S&OP process where you have the key stakeholders together, there's a heck of a coordination effort to be completed to get all these decision makers together in order to have what you said, the weekly or the monthly conversation, which is kind of the highlight of an S&OP cycle process.
Yes, indeed. As you mentioned, when we talk about 2,000 SKUs, even if it's split in several business entities in Europe, in the end, this is like several thousands of SKU location combinations which needs to be managed. When, on the other hand, I was managing retail supply chain, I remember that over 25,000 SKUs and over 200 brick and mortar store locations, we had 5 million combinations of product location to forecast and replenish. Yeah, so in different companies there are different challenges in relation to the planning process. Sometimes in retail or e-commerce, this is more about the mechanics, the analytics that needs to be automated. The key challenge is to find the solution, a system, and the process that can work with this system to have this done. What you mentioned about Logitech is that it was more commercially complicated. So there was a different weight in all of that. And in this environment, what actually was the key challenge that you consider that was really the keystone, to implement this process?
Yeah, so for me, the key challenge, interesting enough, when I joined Logitech with the mission to roll out the global S&OP roadmap, was to realize that nothing has been done on European level. And when I'm saying nothing, there hasn't been conversations yet with the regional commercial leaders why S&OP and what is the global roadmap. There hasn't been even enough conversation that I will be joining as the regional head of S&OP. So when I started, no one was actually waiting for me to join and solve one of the key mysteries or one of the key business issues. So I spent a good time in my first few months to make everybody aware of the process, make sure they understand that I'm here to help and to bring different stakeholders together. And I worked mostly with the regional head of sales and marketing, because for me, the commitment, the demonstrated commitment of key commercial leaders, as much as operation leaders, is one of the key success factors for a functioning S&OP cycle process. And also the highlight, which is the S&OP meeting, that you can actually get tangible results out of these conversations.
Yeah, actually, the engagement of people is one of the key success factors, and at the same time one of the key challenges when implementing the planning process, whatever we will call it, sales and operations or integrated business planning. Yeah. Because without people, this process will never work. That's my personal opinion. And actually, this opinion is enforced with meetings with clients and even academic discussions. Recently, I was on the CSMP conference. Where one of the professors said that S&OP is not working. And this is actually the same comment that I had from one of the cosmetics manufacturers that we were working on with Magna Valor. And it's interesting that people from very different backgrounds, from very different organizations, they are saying that S&OP is not working. But maybe you can give us some examples of how Logitech actually, through the S&OP, has driven tangible business results. Would you be able to convince some of the unbelievers?
Yes, I can talk a little bit about the business results. But let me first say, stating S&OP is not working is, in my mind, it's more of a provoking statement rather than based on some fine research, I would think. S&OP is working in many different shapes and forms and organizations without even calling it S&OP. People sometimes even don't realize that what they are doing is an S&OP process, maybe in a light version of itself, but it somehow exists in the organization. It's just a question of how do you develop and mature the process. So it's a nice provoking statement, but I would have loved to have that conversation on stage because it would have been quite interesting, I suppose.
Next time we really need to meet on the CSMP.
Absolutely.
I will not forgive you that you
join.
were not able to fit your calendar with the last one where you were invited.
Absolutely.
But let's keep it off the line.
Keep it for the future.
Coming back to the business results. So what would be your examples?
So when I'm thinking about the results and when I'm thinking about S&OP, what tangible results it provided, for me, what is coming first to mind is visibility and transparency. And when I'm saying visibility and transparency, it's a door which swings in both directions. It's operations to provide visibility to the business in terms of supply and current demand. But it's also visibility the commercial side of the process provides back to operations on how is the business actually performing versus the demand. And having this conversation throughout the process, but also when you have the S&OP meeting and being transparent in the conversation, that's for me a major accomplishment, because there's always a risk that the commercial teams are holding back because they want to be the heroes at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. So they're holding back the true demand, as much as supply chain or operations is maybe holding back on what are the true challenges in manufacturing, or what are the inventory challenges. So having this open dialogue, this for me, number one, tangible results.
Sometimes it means there will be a little bit of fighting at the beginning of the implementation.
To be, right?
Yeah?
You cannot be in a company, you cannot be always friends. And I think having a healthy debate is actually much better for the business than if everybody is always hugging each other and everything is fine, right? You need that healthy debate. And the second thing, when I'm thinking about tangible results, is, at least for Logitech, it was very important. And I realized this recently also with a lot of other companies, the ability to translate your unit forecast, because you forecast in units, into a business language which is understood across the board, in Logitech's case, dollars or euros, and having a conversation on that level and being able to translate back what does it mean to operations, is an extremely tangible business result as well. That you are able to speak the same language without leaving question marks or blanks or blinds at your conversation partner. And I think the consistency and the connected thinking, so that everybody was able to think really end to end, is a major opportunity to have conversations about risks as much as you can have conversations about opportunities.
And sometimes, and one thing, because I will lose a thought on that, because I really like the idea of visibility that you mentioned, and we were recording with Piotr an episode about visibility in the supply chain, but that was about the physical process visibility. When we talk about the S&OP and when we talk about the visibility, it's very important to understand that this is the visibility of the risks and opportunities in the future. From one of the implementations that I led, the key outcome was the fact that the company stopped working on the crisis mode, that we are not doing this month results. The company stopped running after the fires to put them out. We actually started to talk on the meetings that in the 2 months' time or 3 months' time, we have a gap between the current plan and the budget. And the discussion moved from, Jesus, what we can do right now, to the moment, okay, let's plan something, because we know that we need to do the targets. But the discussion became much more calm. It was more professional than before, because people were no longer under pressure that today they are going to do something. No, they were asked about what you are going to do in 3 months' time. And then they said, okay, maybe today I don't know, but I'm coming back to this meeting next week or in 2 weeks. And I will have the answer because I have time to prepare. This is the visibility that you are talking, I think.
I totally agree with you. And you actually highlight one thing where I wasn't always very happy in some of the S&OP meetings I chaired or I participated, because sometimes also in Logitech, we were kind of falling back to discuss in the S&OP meeting or as part of the cycle process about the shorter term. And therefore, you have S&OE, which is existing at Logitech and which is used to solve short-term issues. So S&OP should be really the focus on longer term to actually prevent to have all these short-term issues. So you cannot always get everyone to only think about long-term. But if your conversation, the majority of the time is looking at a longer-term horizon, and longer-term means different things for different companies. But if you can really get the conversation on the longer term, it is a very tangible result because your shorter term is becoming easier because you solved bottleneck issues or demand issues, supply issues much earlier when you still had time to do this in a way that you don't have to spend extra money of the organization in order to solve them.
Okay, so what was this long term for a global company like Logitech? You mentioned that this is sometimes different for different companies, and I fully agree because the example that I am talking about it's from a retail company where a long term was 3 to 4 months. For Logitech, that was how long?
Yeah, so short term always for Logitech is a certain week horizon because it's the so-called execution horizon. The long term is actually interesting. The long term has changed. There's a long term which is pre-COVID, and there's a long term after COVID. It's really interesting. So the longer term before COVID was certainly outside of the 13-week horizon. And it was probably a 6 to 9 months horizon because of longer lead time components, of shipping cycle times, etc. After COVID, that has really changed because a lot of the longer lead time components have become even longer. And with all the logistics disruptions, also logistics has become to some degree slower. So the longer term became longer, which made it even harder to have long-term conversations because the consumer electronic business, the sales cycles are shorter term focused. So it's much harder to have that longer term conversation and the investment discussions for manufacturing, for components, etc. So it is important that you have the conversation and that you do an estimate and some guessing, but at least the conversation is happening to make decisions and not just procrastinated until it becomes in the execution window.
Yeah, that's interesting point that actually for the electronics, the rotation of the products becomes shorter and shorter. And on the other hand, the lead times become longer and longer, and that's pretty interesting supply chain challenge. We can say that actually right now electronics are fast moving products because they have very short lifespans on the market. But that's a side note to our discussion. Basically, what's interesting in that is that really implementing the S&OP is changing how people are working, yeah, how they are talking between each other. And it's even more complicated when you have a large scale company like Logitech. It's easier when you have a company that is located on one market, or even if it's selling to several markets, it has like a one decision point. There is just one central headquarters, and all the decisions are made there because it's possible in this organization to bring all the people to the single table, as I mentioned. On the other hand, when you have actually a company that has a subsidiaries in several countries, it means that there are several tables to bring the people in, and then also a process on a higher level to run this executive S&OP that you mentioned. Maybe this is the reason why people are saying that S&OP is not working.
Maybe that's one of the reasons why they're saying it. I would like to understand, obviously, a little more what that statement should actually provoke, or what the thinking behind is. I think as an organization, as a company, also like Logitech, you always have to make choices. What are actually the critical conversations? Because also in terms of complexity, what you mentioned before with the retailer, where you had this 10,000s of different combinations of SKUs, I think you need to bring it back, and that's what we did at Logitech as well. What are the critical conversations to have? What are the top products which are important for your success? What are the top challenges you have? You will not focus on the long tail of products in the conversation. And you can delegate some of this also in different pivots of S&OP. At Logitech, there's a category S&OP. So each product category has its own S&OP. And you have a much higher chance to talk also about the longer tail of products. And you have a regional or sales and marketing S&OP, where there you really talk more about the business focus. So there's different levels you have in addressing it, but you need to make sure you're laser focused on what makes really a difference to your organization, because you can't discuss all. And that goes back to maybe a Pareto principle, or it goes back to being clear with all stakeholders what are the critical conversations you would like to have.
Actually, this comes back to the topic of scenarios of the meeting, that you need to really have an agenda. You need to go through this process in a rigid way a little bit. I like to compare this to actually having like a training routine. Before we started recording, we talked that I was running today with a friend almost 5 kilometers today. And this is something that I'm doing on a circular basis. And this is the same with the S&OP. Sometimes, when I hear people saying that S&OP is not working, it's like hearing people, I started to train. Basically, I tried to run 2 times. I was tired. I was actually feeling worse at the beginning versus I was feeling before, and it's not working. So I'm not going to train anymore. And this is very similar, in my opinion, to running S&OP.
It's exactly the same logic. Yes, absolutely. And I think the key message in what you're saying is the consistency. You need to have a consistency in your cycle process, in your S&OP meeting. And what I have seen also at Logitech in various forms and shapes is that in every S&OP meeting, the chair or some of the analysts were bringing different dashboards to the table. So we spent the first 20 minutes understanding the new dashboard. And by the time everybody understood, the next meeting has a different dashboard. I always like to have very simple views, but have them every single time, that everybody around the table is very familiar with the content of it. And we can actually talk about the challenges, and we don't have to challenge the content or if the data is correct. And you waste all your time because you only have 45 minutes to an hour when you chair a meeting. So you want content conversation, and you don't want conversation about different formatting of data. That's why the consistency in the training is super critical.
Yes, it's about having a routine, yeah, and maybe that's sometimes what people don't like about the S&OP because they are not able. Yes, it's boring. It's tedious. You need to do it all the time in the same way, and you need to really put effort to get the results. It's the same as with body weight loss and training, yeah.
It's absolutely the same. Yes, it's really comparable.
And it's all about the commitment. In one of the implementations that I have led in company where I was working a long time, actually it took us almost 3 years to have the process well in place. Of course, the results were there because in the end we decreased the stock levels by 40% almost without losing availability targets. But it took over 2.5 years to go with the process, to have it implemented, to have it supported by the system, to periodically rework the stock issues that we had there. And I think it's really comparable to the body weight loss because unhealthy stock is sometimes like a fat in the organism, and you cannot burn it all at one time. When you have inventory levels on some products over a year versus the sales that you had up till now, you are not going to improve the situation in 3 months. So that's why implementing the S&OP is a challenge, and it's actually a challenge with the culture of work and the people motivation. And the more complex is the organization, the bigger challenge it is. Yeah. So maybe to conclude this discussion, if we fast forward like 5 or 15 years ahead, How do you see the future of the S&OP process? There is so much about the AI in the supply chain, about implementing sophisticated systems. Do you think that this will really change the situation in the planning processes, whatever we call them, S&OP, IBP, whatever?
I think that there are several aspects in the question. There's a technology aspect, there's a process aspect, and certainly, at least implicitly, in my opinion, there's a people aspect. I think if I fast forward, S&OP remains, as much as I believe supply chain remains a people's business. Technology will help to be more efficient, more effective, will give more transparency in different type of scenarios for humans to make the decisions. That's what I'm really thinking. And technology will enable that. And we really have to see AI as an enabler for this in S&OP, because I think AI, or generative AI to be specific, is an enabler to finally be able to process almost an unlimited number of scenarios and probabilities for these scenarios. And you can every quarter, you can go back and look at your previous scenarios, your assumptions, and compare the reality to the different assumptions taken, and look on which of the scenarios were actually the reality versus what you were thinking. So you can adapt much faster to the changing environment, because the business world will change and develop faster. So AI and technology will help to enable that, but S&OP will remain a people's business. And to the example you mentioned earlier, that it took you 3 years to implement the process, I would say it actually differently, and that's also how I look in the future. The process is constantly evolving and changing. So if I want to give you a lot of credit for what you have done, it didn't take you 3 years. You were evolving the process because you were learning throughout the process. The organization you're working with were learning, and therefore the process was evolving, because in my mind, there's no end date to an S&OP process implementation, because it's constantly evolving. And that's how I look at the future of the process. It continuously will evolve, and it will get different names along the way, but it will remain sales and operations planning. If you call it IBP or something else, it will remain, the fundamentals will remain. And that's, for me,
fundamentals will remain with the people. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's why it's so hard. And that's why it's so,
absolutely.
It's so interesting in the end as well. Even if it's boring at times. Okay. But that's a topic for another discussion as well.
I like boring.
For the time being. Yeah, that's good, because otherwise who would do it? Yeah. Okay,
exactly,
but this is a topic for another discussion. For today, thank you very Andreas, for an informative discussion on the S&OP implementations. And for our listeners, if you would like to understand how the S&OP or IBP can be implemented at your company, what are the business results that you can achieve, me and Andreas are available on LinkedIn. We are happy to continue this conversation with you. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you, Abam, for having me and for this great conversation. I really enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Dziękuję, że byliście z nami. Jeżeli macie temat, o którym chcecie, abyśmy porozmawiali, to dajcie nam znać w komentarzach. Sprawdźcie także ofertę naszych sponsorów. Dla przypomnienia, partnerami dzisiejszego odcinka byli Europa Systems, producent i integrator automatyki dla logistyki i produkcji. Ponad 25 lat doświadczenia zdobytego w setkach projektów w 35 krajach. Magna Valor, firma doradcza oferująca usługi optymalizacji łańcucha dostaw i logistyki. Tworzymy rozwiązania redukujące koszty i efektywnie skalujące operacje. Budujemy wartość waszego biznesu. Do usłyszenia w kolejnym odcinku. Pamiętajcie, aby subskrybować nasz kanał.